Welcome to Digital Storm Weekly, the podcast for leaders who don't want buzzwords, but real decisions. I'm Jörg Storm. No hype, no theory, just what actually works. Today's guest is Dr. Hassan is a board-certified thoracic surgeon, a former US Navy captain, and someone who has led AI and health informatics at the highest levels, from operating rooms to the Department of Defense and Pentagon, including the Joint AI Center and the Navy's Medical Command. Today, he's a partner and VP of Operations at Vituity, a practicing surgeon and the founder of Human Care Technologies, focused on deploying AI in healthcare systems where failure is not an option. Yeah, and most leaders say they use AI, but really very few can really explain what this actually changes in workflows, decisions, and our accountability when AI moves from promise to practice. Hassan, one question to you. Why should someone listen to this episode in the next 30 seconds?
All right. A very good question, Dr. Storm. Many people are talking about AI. A few people are using AI. I've built AI. My teams and I have built AI. So if you want to learn what it takes to build AI at an enterprise level and not only survive in the coming years and in the future, but thrive, then listen to this podcast, because we're going to share a framework that will give you a very succinct way of how you apply AI in your enterprise to make a difference and make an impact.
That sounds interesting. Okay, I'm also excited to watch this. Let's start with some rapid fire questions. Really, Hassan, only very short answers. One AI use case in healthcare you actually trust today?
I'm very excited about many of the computer vision applications. So the diagnostics for retinopathy, the diagnostics for things like the augmented reality microscopes that we put into practice at the Pentagon. These are very valid. They've been validated. They've been tested. They've been shown to have extremely high sensitivities and specificities for making diagnosis that are accurate. And also the applications that are aligned with that along dermatology. I think these are very good tools, and they're force multipliers. They're allowing access to be obtained from people who otherwise would not have a resource to find out diagnoses for several rate-limiting and consequential diseases.
Let's take it the opposite way.
Yeah.
One AI use case in healthcare that's mostly theater, which doesn't bring any value.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, and don't know where to begin with that. But suffice to say, the things that are not validated are the ones that I would say are right now just theater. There's lots of fancy slide decks. There's lots of vaporware, if you will, but many of these things have not been tried and true and tested in the clinic, in the places where it matters, and with the fidelity that's needed to get the confidence for clinicians to trust the applications.
Another question. Buy versus build for clinical AI, your default rule, and why?
Buy versus build. It depends. I know that's not really the answer you want, but it depends. It depends what resources you have, and it also depends what you're trying to achieve in a healthcare organization. If you're in a clinic, does it make sense to buy an entire enterprise infrastructure and make that investment? Probably not. If you're a huge organization, absolutely, you may want to build that, but you also have to take into account the partners that you need to have an effective system.
Okay. Imagine you run a health system for 90 days. What would you stop immediately?
I would stop immediately bad decision making.
Like what?
Like what? Like making just blanket statements that we're going to do AI. What does that mean? People, I think, equate AI as doing something. Bringing an AI solution into your enterprise is actually not doing AI, because AI is not going to be a panacea. If you have bad systems and processes and you have a strategy that's not aligned with the current market and what you're trying to achieve as an organization, there's no AI in the world that's going to bring any kind of value to that situation.
Okay, fair point. So let's go into kind of mindset topics. And you have a super interesting CV. I think over 20 years, Navy commander. So you operated in environments where mistakes cost life. Yeah, combat zones, operating rooms, national defense systems, Pentagon. What belief about AI in healthcare did you have to unlearn in the hard way?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the answer I just gave you. The fact that people think that AI, bringing this into an enterprise, is going to solve a problem. That's not how it works. And, you know, the level set and set the table, let's just define AI as I'm using it in this context. It is human behavior being mimicked by machines, machines mimicking human behavior. Now, under that very broad umbrella, there's a lot that one can say encompasses AI. And I think when you think about where these mistakes are made, it's that AI in and of itself is not the solution. You have to have good systems, processes, and a strategy in place that you use this very powerful technology to enhance and to get you the objectives that you're trying to achieve.
And the right data.
And the
Also.
right data, absolutely.
Yeah.
Correct.
You moved from the frontline surgery into AI strategy at the Pentagon.
I did, yeah.
Yeah, you're correct. Yeah. And what looked risky or irrational at that time? And what do you think what turned out to be essential for you?
Yeah. Well, what looked risky at the time was trying to convince individuals, if you can imagine this, at the Pentagon and throughout the Department of Defense that AI was something that was important that we needed to invest in. So you have to take some license here and give me the leeway of telling you what time that was. That was back in 2016, 2017, 2018.
Before ChatGPT.
Before ET. I get that. At that time, AI has been around for decades, but at that point, it was still a very amorphous thing that people were sort of wrapping their heads around. And not a computer scientist, an AI, coder. If you weren't someone that was actually ingrained and enmeshed in AI at that time, AI was very abstract to you, right? What ChatGPT did was it allowed the layperson to experience and touch and feel and use AI in a way that was never really possible before unless you were really steeped in coding and you were, just involved in that world. And so if you can think about it, at that time, we were trying to evangelize AI. That was really the charge of the Department of Defense gave to our organization, the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center. And fortunately, we had incredible leaders at that time that really pushed the envelope and told us that we have to make sure we impress upon our leadership and entire organization that AI is something that we fundamentally have to embrace, and it has to be something that permeates through every one of our operations across all of our domains, and we have to get up to speed with it. And, it made a big difference at the time, but it was very hard. And now those same individuals that were very dubious about, what the power of AI is, what's its potential, I think, of course, have come around, obviously.
Coming to the next question. Now, with training across medicine, policy, business, and also national security, that's what you all did. Where do technologies misunderstand healthcare, and where do clinicians like you misunderstand technology? I think this is there are a lot of differences.
Yeah, there are very much different. You can relate to this. So as with your engineering and science background, so very practical, logical. Healthcare is not that way. In the United States, let me caveat that, because in the United States, when you take sort of a problem like you do in technology or in engineering, there's very logical, stepwise fashions of how you can get to a solution. The problem and the challenges, I should say, mainly challenges in healthcare in the United States, is that there are a lot of malaligned incentives. And as a result, what you think is a very plausible, very practical solution may not, in fact, be able to be implemented. And when it is implemented, you have unintended consequences that cause problems elsewhere in the system. So just very practically, you have insurance companies, you have hospitals, you have clinicians, and of course you have the patients, and everyone's incentive are somewhat malaligned, if you can believe that. That's not the case in most other industries, right? It makes a lot of sense. So I'll just give you a practical example that many of your viewers and certainly anyone that's experienced U.S. healthcare can appreciate. You go into the ER and anywhere in the United States, and something happens to you because you have a problem, you have a sprained ankle, you have a cough, you have a cold, whatever it is. I dare you to stop anyone in the entire continuum of that engagement and ask them, how much is this costing us right now? And they won't be able to tell you. They'll have some vague answers. They may have some opinions. They may have some estimates. But hey, at the end of that entire encounter, after all of the procedures and tests are all done, then you'll get a bill. And then you'll have to figure out how did that bill get generated. By the way, you may not get paid that bill for all the people that have, put their sort of expenses down. That's unlike any other industry. If you go into a supermarket, down to the unit level, they can tell you what this cost is. They can tell you exactly why it's costing that because of all of the inputs that have come into that particular product, right, or service. That is why U.S. healthcare, I think, becomes an enigma for technologists and people that come from a different background that's not healthcare. And
There
those
we
of us that
are.
have been, those of us that have been living in healthcare, we understand that there's a lot of complexity. So when you overlay the technology of AI, which can be very expensive, it's not an insignificant or a very inexpensive technology to implement, especially at scale, then how do you extract that value out of that, especially when you have a system that has so many different and malaligned incentives?
Yeah, fair point. I think this brings us then to the next question. Yeah, from your experience of the Department of Defense, JAIC, and also enterprise healthcare, how you personally define a high ROI AI use case in healthcare? You said there are a lot of potentials, and how do you know what is wrong?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in a brief one-word answer to the question, impact. What's the impact? The beauty and I think the privilege and honor that I had of serving in the United States Navy for 25 years, and particularly in the Department of Defense under the auspice of the JAIC, implementing warfighter health mission sets and solutions was this. The United States military's health system is different than the United States civilian sector health system, right? Our incentives are not the same. We are there to support the warfighter and their families. And so with that mission and objective in mind, our ability to implement and to scale solutions is a lot different, if that makes sense. And what that affords us the opportunity to do, in my opinion, is what we did over the course of the time that our solutions were being implemented and delivered across the military health system. Our incentives were just aligned to supporting the warfighter, making the mission successful. And in that way, we were able to bring practical solutions into the ecosystem in a way that is a little bit more challenging, I would argue, in the civilian sector, where you have different incentives, malaligned sort of priorities, and also different reimbursement as well as payments and just different goals all around. So succinctly, the answer was impact. And where we had impact was making our support to the warfighter much more efficient, much more effective, improving outcomes, and as a result, leading to mission success and the overarching sort of aim of increasing lethality for our warfighters.
I would like to be a little bit more precise. We talk a lot about impact and benefit.
Sure.
I'm not sure if you can talk about it, but because it maybe could be confidential. But could you walk us through one AI deployment that really worked and where you had some big benefit?
Absolutely. So in the middle of the pandemic, and we wrote about this, so you can Google this and search it and you can see the great work that we did. So in the middle of the pandemic, if you can imagine, again, the world experienced the pandemic in different ways at different times throughout the entire time that we were still living through, and quite frankly. But in the early spring of 2020, we at the Pentagon and across many of the Department of Defense and other government agencies were at home, right? Everyone was sort of isolating at home. And even in that environment, we had this desire and this mission to completely serve and to support what was happening across the country. Now, what we were able to do, which was very novel, was we were able to, at a time when testing was not very robust, we were able to take data from our colleagues and partners at the Center for Medicare and Services, CMS, and have data sharing agreements. And what we used were claims data for flu-like symptoms as a surrogate marker to posit that those were probably COVID cases that were presenting themselves to the hospital. Now, across our engineers, across all of our teams, we were able to take that information as well as supply chain data from the commercial sector, and we build models to predict, Dr. Storm, down to the zip code level where COVID cases were going to be emerging.
Oh, wow. Okay. Wow.
Now, this
Interesting.
now you may say, well, what's the benefit of that? Well, this is a practical application of using information, data, taking that insight and using it to deploy resources effectively. Because again, if you think about it, on the East Coast and on the West Coast of the United States back in early spring of 2020, that's where the cases were most concentrated. But there were pockets happening all over the country at different times and different stages. We needed to send personnel. We needed to send support to the NAP. And that model served as a basis for helping to inform those decisions that were being made. Did that improve outcomes? Absolutely. Did that improve the the adjudication of resources and personnel and supplies, absolutely. And then ultimately it helped to sort of distribute and pinpoint and be more strategic as far as where we would start sending out, vaccines when they became available. So I think that to me was a practical example at a scale, at a national scale, that absolutely made a difference, in my opinion, during a time of crisis. You're excited that we were able to be creative in terms of solving a problem and in using AI to do that in a way that was very consequential, right? Because those were translating into lives being saved, suffering being abated, and ideally helping to sort of address what was happening across the country that was, in many ways, a disaster.
Okay. Now, that was now a positive example. Now let's go on the other side. Describe an AI initiative that failed or stalled and what actually broke and why. Do you have any example on that?
Yeah, unfortunately,
sadly.
Unfortunately, I have an example of that too. I have a project that we were, so excited about. It was called Project Darwin. It stood for Digital AI Acceleration with Imaging Integration. So, the military, we like to make things and simplify them with one word, like Darwin. So Project Darwin was our attempt in the DoD to take a pilot project that had worked very effectively. In fact, it was tremendous. We also published on this. It was data that we used, digital slide data. So if you think about pathology, right, when you take tissue or a sample from something that is abnormal, we slice it up, we stain it, and we look at it under a microscope. Those images are on glass and we look through the microscope. We digitize those images, and with some partners from Google and another company called Genoptech, we built this platform, which was an augmented reality microscope. Now, what it did, Dr. Storm, for several different diseases for which we were training the model sets on based on pathologic specimens, we were able to detect cancer. And this platform would circle rings around the abnormal cells. Brilliant. Because what that did was it increased the efficiency and the effectiveness of pathologists, right? They can look through many more slides in a shorter period of time because this device and this platform, this interface was helping them to identify the pathology earlier and with greater accuracy. So what we wanted to do was scale that and apply this platform or give this resource to many of the scientists and researchers that are out there. So what your viewers may not know is the Department of Defense, under the agency of the Joint Pathology Center, is the greatest repository of pathology slides probably ever assembled in the world. Over 100 years, many institutions, including the military, across the civilian sectors, have sent specimens to the lab. It's gone through different names, but the Joint Pathology Center is the repository for all of those slides. Many of them are glass slides in the traditional model and frame, but we had adopted and had sort of implemented this process of digitizing those slides. So if you can imagine the plethora of pathology over humankind and over human history, over 100 years, all of these resources, millions and millions of slides. And our plan under this Darwin project, this initiative, was to help build a repository, almost having like a library where you would have digitized slides of all of this pathology. Now, just think about the great resource that could be. It's akin to the Human Genome Project, right? Because now researchers and scientists from all over the world could use that.
Is this done already, or is it still in progress?
It's still in progress, but you asked specifically what was one of the projects that stalled when I was. And it stalled for many reasons, largely political, some very protective people over the data. As you know, you need the data. We identified processes to de-identify the data and had very good systems in place, I think, to ensure fidelity and create a resource with a pretty nominal investment, considering what the potential return on investment would be, not only for the DoD but for humankind. So that was one of those projects I wish we would have had a bit more acceleration of during the time I was there. Now, fortunately, there's still some movement in that direction. We're not quite there to the end point yet, but there is some effort, and there are efforts to continue to digitize those slides and to make that resource available. I liked, of course, if it would have happened a lot faster and under the time that and during the time that I was there. But that was one of those instances where you ask, like, what happened, what stalled? And this is where I teach this in my course. I teach at the Center for Digital Health and Artificial Intelligence at Johns Hopkins Business School. And I told my students during our digital transformation course and AI strategy course that what technologists and sometimes leadership gets wrong in institutions when they're implementing AI or any technology for that matter is that they lead with the tech. We got to get the tech to work, and you absolutely have to do that. You don't want tech debt. You don't want to have technical problems. You don't want to have security problems. You don't want to have failing infrastructure and all of those things. So all are important. But I will tell you, Dr. Storm, what will kill a project faster than anything else is if you don't pay attention to the people that are going to be impacted by this technology and the process. You cannot divorce the people and the process from the technology, because if you blow that triad up, nothing will work.
Yeah, agreed. I think you maybe with your answer, you already answered some of the points I would like to ask in the next question. Goes in the same way, I would say. At a scale, healthcare AI runs into governance, data and trust issues. That's what you mentioned before. Yeah, trust, data issues from your Pentagon example. Which bottlenecks do leaders consistently underestimate until it's too late? Do you have any idea, any example on that?
Yeah, 100%. Well, I will tell you, as a leader, when I was leading that portfolio, the Warfighter Health Mission, I appreciated it, but it's never been lost on me. I will say that the people factor is very important. You have to navigate the politics, the buy-in, the resistance, and also just communicating to people what's happening. You can't
especially, I think, in AI project, there should be a lot of resistance, with people afraid about losing their jobs.
Absolutely. Their agency, their job, their roles, what's the future going to have? So I think you can never underestimate the people factor and how lives are going to be impacted by this technology. You see, when you sit back in the room and you're making these decisions and the vendors come in and they show you the fancy slides and that this is going to happen and the videos and the demos, it all looks great. But if you haven't really involved the people at the ground level and the people that are going to be not only implementing the solution, but being impacted by it, and of course, taking into account what's going to happen to the patient experience, and do that isolated from really considering those factors, they're going to have problems. So I will say that overall, like you said, governance is really important. And I'll channel one of my colleagues. He made a good point. What governance does in an organization, particularly in healthcare, is you can bring all of the stakeholders into the conversation. So you're not making a decision in isolation. So you bring the technology folks in, you bring your IT people, and you bring your cyber people, you bring legal, you bring ethics, you bring the clinicians, you bring the administrators, you bring the payers, you bring the nurses, you bring all of these people, bring the patient advocates, and have the conversations. Very, very difficult. I'm not suggesting that's easy. It's much faster to just make the decision, write the paper, sign the contracts, and just go deploy. But it will fail. It will fail and you won't get the results you want. Now, building that governance and building that consensus is not easy. I'm not suggesting it is, but that's the difficult work that we did that paid huge dividends. And why did that pay huge dividends, Dr. Storm? So I'll channel, like I said, my colleague, Dr. Osborne. He said what governance does, and you'll appreciate this with our Mercedes-Benz affinity, is that it does for an organization what Mario Andretti has channeled, right? Mario Andretti is asked, why does he go fast? Or why can he go fast? Why can Mario Andretti go fast? Is it the engine? Is it the tires? Is it the...
Sure.
Why? What do you think? I'll ask you that question. Why can you go fast?
Why do I go fast?
Yeah, in a car. It's counterintuitive, but I'm giving you the illustration of why governance is important.
In Germany, you mean?
Anywhere. Why can you go fast in a car? Why do you drive fast?
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. Why I can go faster? Because the engine is capable to do so. The roads are safe. Everyone follows some rules and guidelines. I think that's the most important one. Everyone follows
all of those things. I absolutely agree with you are important. But the most important reason I would suggest, and you may agree with this, of why you can go fast is because you have brakes.
Also, yeah, sure.
Right? Because if you had no brakes, you wouldn't go as fast as you would go. So what governance does in an AI environment when you're implementing it in an institution is it allows you to go fast, believe it or not, because you can put the brakes on. Because if you have a governance structure that takes into account the infrastructure, you have data provenance, you have all the people that are going to be impacted by this AI solution on board and understanding what's happening, and you have a process and a system in place that you can shut something down if it goes bad or it starts to harm people, then what does that allow you to do now? It unleashes the organization to be able to go fast, much, much more effective than to have a bunch of random rogue people throughout your organization just doing all kinds of things. But again, it's a painful process and it is bureaucratic, but it allows you to be able to put the systems in place that can scale things that work well, throttle the things that don't work, eliminate the things that are harmful or can jeopardize the organization. And that governance is what really we spend most of our time doing in my organization. And I would argue that the organizations that are doing AI implementation well right now have very good governance in their institutions.
Okay. Coming to the next question. Now, when does AI decision support cross the line into decision authority? You talk about agentic AI making decisions.
Yeah.
And who should be then accountable when it does make decisions? Let's say you have a radiology checking MRTs, for example, via AI. Who is accountable in that case?
Yeah. Well, I'll answer the second part of the question first. The person who's going to be accountable is the physician, the healthcare provider, the health organization, the hospital. You know, the United States is a very litigious culture here, so everyone will be implicated. And if there's a way to sue the vendor of the AI solution, they'll probably do that as well. Now, having said that, what mitigates that? Again, good governance, kind of going back to the previous answer, because now you can put in place some of these safety measures and you can actually have conversations and consider in scenarios what could go wrong. And if it does, how do we mitigate it? How do we address it? How do we stop it faster? But the point that you made about agentic agents is only going to continue, right? It's happening.
We'll only get faster and more.
It's going to be faster. Yeah. So we are going to be subject to much, much more, not less, much, much more of AI engagement throughout every aspect of our lives, including healthcare. Absolutely. The decisions that are made and the lives that are going to be impacted, the responsibility is ultimately going to be on that healthcare provider and the healthcare organization. Again, which is why for those listening, I would really impress upon them that it is critically important that you really spend time before getting involved into the AI deployment and the building and the scaling, that you have in place incredibly good governance structures.
In place, yeah. Agree. Yeah. Coming to the kind of an executive reality check, you have experience in boardrooms and hospitals. And what do you think? What AI advice sounds smart in the boardroom but fails in a hospital?
Yeah. We need an AI strategy. That sounds smart. It sounds good for the CEO to get there, or the CMO. We need to do AI strategy. Well, what does that mean? Like I just told you, in the beginning, we set the table. If you asked everyone in your boardroom, what does AI mean? How do they define AI? You'll have, 12, 13, 15 different definitions. So if you can't even encapsulate what people are believing or considering or thinking AI is, and you're not even on the same page there, I think that's where people get it wrong. And it sounds smart because everyone else is doing AI, so you feel like you have to do AI, but that's not going to work. Again, that's why I always like to start in the beginning of making sure we're all thinking about the same thing. If we're saying that AI is human behavior being mimicked by machines, and machines mimicking human behavior, now we're talking about a lot of different things. And as long as we agree that that's kind of our place of where we're going to begin as far as defining what it is that we're considering and talking about when we use AI in this context, now we can start having a conversation.
Okay.
But that's where I think people get things wrong. We need an AI strategy. I don't think it's a good AI strategy.
Okay. When you think about healthcare organizations, when you talk to them, when do you think they are lying to themselves about their AI readiness? Everyone says, I'm AI ready, I want to do something AI, but...
Yeah, I think they're getting we're AI ready because we have an AI project.
Yes.
That may be working well in the clinic, or they had a very fancy demo, or maybe even a few people are being impacted in one department. Here's what I learned, and this is why I like to espouse the experience I had, because it's as a surgeon, I've been a surgeon now for over 20 years, 25 plus years. There's no surgery you can learn in a textbook. You can read about surgery, you can even watch surgery, but unless you do surgery, you're not going to learn how to do surgery. We built AI. Our teams built AI. We learned a tremendous amount. So when you talk about AI readiness, what we realized when we were trying to deploy AI was that we weren't ready. Dr. Storm, we weren't ready. I'll confess it. We weren't ready.
Yeah.
Initially, we were not ready. We began to learn about these great solutions that the commercial sector had. We were building some in-house, and we tried to deploy it in the healthcare environment. We weren't ready. You know when we realized we weren't ready? Because we realized we didn't have access to the data. The data that we did have wasn't structured accordingly.
Oh.
You need structured data. The data was not AIzable.
Okay.
The data was not AIzable. We didn't have the right infrastructure, Dr. Storm, and we didn't have the right governance in place. That's why I say when people say, "Oh, we're AI ready," I'm immediately going to ask, "Where's your data? What kind of data do you have? How do you access that data? Do you have data provenance? What's your infrastructure? What's your security around your infrastructure? And then what's your governance?" Like, I think those are three fundamental things you just have to have in place before you say you're ready, you know, and you have to do an honest assessment of that, because you may not even know what you don't know unless you really have an assessment of that. And that's exactly what happened to us. We had to actually redesign our infrastructure for our electronic health architecture. We had made a huge investment. We were implementing it as we were doing our work at the Joint. We were implementing a brand new, modernized electronic health infrastructure and the new system. And we realized that because of the way it was being built, because of the way the data was being compartmentalized, we weren't going to be able to overlay any AI applications because of the way the architecture was configured. And we had to go back and redesign that, make investments so that we would be able to make our data accessible in the future so we could build on top of that and bring us this sort of potential and all of this great promise of AI.
I think this goes directly to the next question. If you look back and maybe you take this example, which AI-related decision cost more politically or financially than you expected? That's the one?
Yeah.
Could
well,
be, huh?
that one did. Fortunately, we caught it early enough that we were able to make those adjustments early on. But politically, I would go back to that JPC example, the Project Darwin. I think we had a tremendous opportunity there. But, you know, it just... we couldn't get through the political environment there at the time, but we're making progress. But you're right, you can get down very far down a path of implementing investments, but if you haven't really had an honest assessment of your organization's data provenance, the infrastructure, and governance, you're setting yourself and your institution up for failure and maybe even obsolescence, especially in healthcare, because other organizations that have done that well, they're going to surpass you, and their patients are not going to come to you. They're going to go to where they know they're going to get the best care that is absolutely using and implementing the great things that AI brings to taking care of patients.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Coming to your positioning, what do you think? What healthcare AI trend is the most overhyped right now?
Yeah, there's so much that's overhyped right now. I think just the fact that people say they're doing AI. That's why I like to start with that. You know, the people talking about AI, we're doing AI, and then you ask them, peel the onion back and start to ask them, well, give me some examples. What are you doing? Well, like we have a medical record analysis. Well, like how is that really AI? Is that human behavior being mimicked by machines mimicking human behavior and doing it in a way that's effective? So I think there's a lot of hype because a lot of people are talking about AI. There's some use cases people are using it on the fringe, but the adoption of AI really is not as robust as you would think. Even though when ChatGPT came out, we had over 100 million subscribers in 30 days, the most adoption of any application is the most promising sector for using AI in an effective way that can bring a lot of value as well as benefit to patients. So I think there's a lot of hype, but I think unless you distill down those really key elements of like, what is the data? Where is the data being housed at an organizational level? What's the infrastructure and what's your governance? If you don't have those three things in place, then you are really overselling what you are able to, deliver, I think, to the patient and to the enterprise.
Okay, got it. You have a lot of experience, in hospitals and boardrooms, and from what you learned so far, which AI initiative would you kill first, and also which would you start first, and why?
Yeah, so I will start with one of the things I learned, and I wrote about it in my book, Smart Healthcare with AI, is this experience of deploying some AI, starting to have some pilots, having failures, and then learning from those failures, engendered in me this concept of like, all right, I have to begin with some principles. That's why I said you don't begin with saying I have an AI strategy. You begin with what is the strategy of our organization? What are our missions? What are our goals? What are our objectives? You overlay and use AI to enhance and implement those goals to make them more effective. So I created a framework. It's called the VP4 framework. So this would be the first thing I do when I walk into an organization. I'll make an assessment. Are you ready for delivering AI at scale? You would not be ready to deliver AI at scale if you don't have access to data, you don't have data provenance, infrastructure is not in place, and you at least begin the governance conversation. You don't have to have all the elements in place because that's going to be an evolving thing. But you have to have those first three things. So that would be the first step. I would make sure we have really an honest assessment. And then I'd use my framework. VP4 is the framework. VP, there's 4 Ps. Idea is that we are using this technology, machines mimicking human behavior, to do our work better. We need to find out what our purpose is. So that's the first P. We need to personalize whatever that solution is for the people that are going to be impacted and the people that are going to be using it. We have to have a partnership, and that partnership is part of that governance. We have to partner with patients. We have to partner with the vendors. We have to partner with data scientists. We have to partner with our nurses, our legal, our ethicists. All of these people have to come into play. And then the last P is this. Dr. Storm, if you can do all of those things great and you do them well and you do them effective, you are going to realize what everybody is doing all of this AI for: productivity. Productivity.
Sure.
At the end of the day, why are we doing all of this? Why do you need AI? There was a time when a washing machine was considered AI because it was a machine mimicking human behavior. Well, now that we have washing machines, guess what? We can be more productive. We can wash a lot of clothes. We don't have to spend time going out and hanging it up on the lines and wait for the wind and the sun to dry the clothes because we have the dryer. So my point is, in healthcare, we want to be more productive. We want to be able to deliver better care in a much more efficient and streamlined way so that we can give the patient what they need, that remedy for their ailments, their illness, and extend longevity and give the health back to the years that they have left as they live their lives. Yeah. And that productivity comes from, again, fulfilling all those things. Starting with your strategy, not an AI strategy. What's the strategy for the organization? And then again, what are those fundamental things that have to be there in place for readiness? Your data, your infrastructure, the governance. Okay. And then using that framework, purpose, personalization, partnership, and all of those things brought together in a very good way will bring you productivity, which is what we all want. And then that return on investment will be.
That makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Last section for this part. Unpopular opinion. What truth about AI and human care do most leaders avoid saying out loud?
I'm laughing because I was at a closed door meeting yesterday with many healthcare leaders, executives, and not many clinicians in the room. Okay. And this is the unpopular opinion, I believe, that a lot of leaders are avoiding to say out loud. That they're scared. They're scared because they know, if they're honest to themselves, they know that the status quo is going to be upended, particularly in the United States. I can talk about that specifically. United States healthcare system. If you're a leader in the United States healthcare system right now and you're honest with yourself, you're probably not saying it, but you have to understand and appreciate that the status quo is about to be upended. And here's why. And let me tell you why. I don't want to just say that.
It would be the next question. Yeah. Why do you think so?
Why would I say something like that? Because here's the truth, Dr. Storm. We're living in a time that I like to call AIPE. Just use that as a word. AIPE. What does that mean? We have asymmetric information empowered by, powered by AI, asymmetric information powered by AI that is empowering patients. So you think about it. And now this applies all around the world. If you think of the arc of human evolution from the very, very beginning of time, where we had shamans and we had healers and we had all the different people that humans have described and defined as healers and health professionals, these people, these individuals have always known more than the patient about what's happening to them, right? When you are sick, you don't know what's happening. You have a fever, you have a cold, you have a stomach ache, you have something broken, whatever. You go to the expert. and you go to that expert and you try and get information from them. And usually that expert knew everything about what was happening with you. They'd ask questions, they'd get information, and they'd synthesize what your diagnosis is. But Dr. Storm, for the first time, really, right? The first time ever, patients have the power to learn more about what's happening with them outside of engaging with that health professional or organization or hospital. So think about that. That is why I say it's asymmetric, because not only can the patient learn more about what's happening with them, they can get that knowledge and insight about their particular condition in a way that can never be duplicated, especially if it's done well. And let me caveat all that. I'm not suggesting you go and get Dr. Google. No,
but you have ChatGPT Health now.
I'm talking about ChatGPT Health. I'm talking about open evidence. I'm talking about large language models that have been trained on the expanse of all of the
medical records,
random clinical trials, the nuance, the evidence-based things that we have used to create this paradigm of clinical practice guidelines for every condition that we treat. Now, you take that, and now you've given that access to me, a layperson, or even someone with just the smallest amount of interest and curiosity about what's happening with themselves. They can ask questions. They can bring data in. They can take sensing information from their watches. They can take their lab test. They can bring their chart. They can bring their record. And they can have all of this synthesized into something formulaic that gives them insight into what's happening with them. That's why I say it's asymmetric. Because if you've been to the hospital, you've been to the doctor, you've even been taken care of by a physician for years and years and years, your ability to do what they can't do right now is now your agency.
Okay.
And what that does is it's going to change this paradigm, because information, especially information that's harnessed well, is very powerful. And if that information now and that exchange is asymmetric, it upends everything. And you're seeing it happen all over the U.S. healthcare system now. People are absolutely going around the apparatus of our healthcare organizations to seek care. And there are commercial agencies and entities and organizations like him and hers that just say, hey, do you have a problem with your weight? Are you feeling, you're having behavioral health issues? Answer some questions and we'll send you what you need. And it can be done efficiently. Now, one could argue, well, they're not taking into account everything else. Guess what? The patient has power and agency over their own health now. And if they have the ability to bypass a very ineffective and sometimes not efficient organization and get what they need so that they can feel better, what are they going to do? Left with that option, they're going to do that. And what I'm suggesting to you is, when you ask what's the unpopular opinion, I think if you're a leader of an organization that has been doing things the same way for the last several decades, if you don't understand and appreciate what's happening under the floor beneath you right now, that the entire foundation of what was built as a health is changing.
Yeah.
Then you're really not being honest with yourself. And we've seen it happen in healthcare over the years. But what's happened with AI is that it is on a scale and on a magnitude and impacting the patients in a way that nothing else has ever done.
At an exponentially scale, yeah? All these
at scale. So I'm a cardiac surgeon. And when I started doing cardiac surgery, many of my mentors and colleagues, we were doing a lot of coronary artery bypass grafting. We take the veins out of the legs and we crack the chest open. CABG was a very big deal. And so was valve surgery. And as I was learning and seeing what was happening and how medical advances were happening, the cardiologists, not the surgeons, were taking little catheters and putting it into the veins, into the arteries, and they were able to blow up the blockages and put stents in, and they started to take all of our business away. So now we have less of it. So I started to see, all right, if I want to do cardiac surgery, I'll go into transplant, because right now I don't think the cardiologists can do that. The transplant surgeons still have to take a heart out. Yeah. So I was surviving as things were evolving. Do you know, I have colleagues right now, Dr. Storm, that I remember from general surgery, they were bariatric surgeons. So the weight loss surgery where you go and you make, adjustments in sort of the configuration of the GI system, and you do it in such a way that patients can lose weight. Guess what? There's a drug that came out recently. You may have heard of it, GLP-1. that entire sector
Business went down.
it's being eliminated. People are closing entire centers that they developed called bariatric centers that are being closed down. So if you're a healthcare leader, you've seen the evolution of how technologies in different disciplines have disrupted and upended service lines. Well, what's happening with AI is all of that on steroids, but with this caveat, now patients have power, and they
I
have
think,
power through asymmetric information.
Hassan, I think this is a perfect closing. What do you think? Perfect. We looked into the future right now. What is happening? What we have to watch? Maybe one more thing. Yeah, the last question, and then I think we have to stop. Let's say 3 years out of now. What do you think what will happen with AI and healthcare?
Yeah.
Very short outlook.
Very short outlook. I don't think anyone knows. And I say that because in 2019, I could never have imagined that ChatGPT would come and make all the work that we were struggling to do for the last few years, make it obsolete, because now everyone knows about AI. The best company, the most impactful company, the thing that's going to change the paradigm of AI, none of us right now know about it. In 2029, 2030, we may be thinking and talking about something that we don't even have on our radar right now. That is how fast things are evolving, Dr. Storm. So I will say that we may not be able to predict the future, but we will be able to say this. It is going to be fundamentally different than it is right now, particularly in healthcare.
That's a good closing. Thanks, Hassan, for that. Yeah, that's it for today's Digital Storm Weekly. If there's one takeaway, this AI in healthcare doesn't fail because technology. It fails because organizations don't change how decisions are made. Hassan, you mentioned this. You also have to involve people at the end. And Hassan has lived this topic in surgery, in the military, and at a national scale. In this episode, if this challenged how you think about AI and leadership, follow this podcast, like it, and share it with someone who still thinks AI is mainly a tech problem and maybe only a topic for the CIO. All the links are shown in the show notes. So, for example, links to Hassan's LinkedIn and company pages, as well as Digital Storm Weekly newsletter. And remember, technology doesn't change systems, decisions do. Thank you very much. Thanks, Hassan. And looking forward to our next edition. Thank you. See you.
Thank you. All right.